The black SUV pulled up to the curb outside the Midtown Manhattan studio, its tinted windows reflecting the chaos of flashing cameras and screaming fans. Through the bulletproof glass, Taylor Swift could see the sea of faces pressed against the metal barriers, their phones held high like digital torches in the October evening. The familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with anxiety coursed through her veins, the same cocktail she'd been drinking for over a decade of public appearances. "Remember, keep it light and charming," her publicist Andrea said from the seat beside her. "Ethan Cole likes to push buttons but don't take the bait. You're here to promote the new album, nothing more. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Taylor nodded, adjusting the collar of her emerald silk blouse. The color had been chosen specifically. Research showed it photographed well under studio lights and conveyed confidence without appearing aggressive. Every detail of her appearance had been calculated, from the subtle winged eyeliner to the vintage-inspired midi skirt that struck the perfect balance between relatable and aspirational. "He's been making jokes about pop stars all week," her manager added, scrolling through his phone. "Nothing too harsh, but he's clearly building to something for tonight's show." Inside the studio building, 30 floors above the street-level pandemonium, Maya Rodriguez stood in the production office, her stomach churning as she watched the live feed from the green room. She'd been producing Late Night with Ethan Cole for 3 years, long enough to recognize the glint in her host's eyes when he was planning something that would trend on social media by midnight. "She's here," Maya announced into her headset, watching Taylor's security team establish their perimeter in the lobby. Down the hall in his dressing room, Ethan Cole studied his reflection in the mirror, practicing the smile that had launched 1,000 viral clips. At 35, he'd clawed his way from failed stand-up comic to network television host through a combination of sharp wit and calculated risk-taking. Tonight felt different though, bigger, the kind of moment that could define a career or destroy one. "DJ, you ready for some fireworks?" Ethan called to his longtime musical sidekick, Darren DJ Lee, who was tuning his keyboard in the corner. "Man, I just play the music," DJ replied, but his expression betrayed concern. He'd seen Ethan in this mood before, the dangerous combination of ambition and insecurity that made him push celebrities harder than necessary. In the building's executive suite, network programming chief Jonah Fields watched the preliminary ratings predictions with satisfaction. Taylor Swift's appearance had already generated more pre-show buzz than they'd seen all season. Social media mentions were through the roof, and the advertising team had sold additional commercial slots at premium rates. "Whatever happens tonight," Jonah muttered to his assistant, "we're airing it live." Back in the green room, Taylor's team continued their final preparations. Her hair and makeup were flawless, her talking points rehearsed, her anecdotes timed to the second. But as she stood to make her way toward the stage entrance, something felt different about tonight. Maybe it was the way the production assistants avoided her eyes, or the unusual energy crackling through the studio corridors. The stage manager appeared at her elbow. "Ms. Swift? We're ready for you." Taylor took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and followed him down the brightly lit hallway toward the stage entrance. Behind the curtain, she could hear Ethan delivering his opening monologue, his voice carrying that familiar mixture of charm and barely contained mischief that had made him famous. She had no idea that in less than an hour, everything would change. The studio erupted as Taylor Swift stepped through the curtain, the audience's cheers washing over her like a familiar embrace. Under the hot stage lights, she felt herself slip seamlessly into performance mode. The practiced smile, the graceful wave, the perfectly timed pause to let the applause build before gesturing for quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Taylor Swift," Ethan Cole announced, his arms spread wide in theatrical welcome. He bounded across the stage toward her, all energy and charisma, taking her hand in both of his. "Taylor, welcome back to the show. You look absolutely stunning, like you stepped out of a magazine cover." "Thank you for having me, Ethan," Taylor replied, her voice pitched to carry the warmth that had charmed millions. "Though I have to say, your suit is giving me major envy. Where did you get that?" The audience laughed appreciatively as they settled into their chairs. DJ Lee played a bouncing melody on his keyboard, adding a soundtrack of joy to the moment. Everything felt exactly as it should. Polished, predictable, safe. "Oh, this old thing?" Ethan gestured to his navy blazer with mock modesty. "I got it from the same place I get all my confidence. Pure delusion and expensive therapy." The crowd roared, and even Taylor laughed genuinely, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "So, Taylor, I have to ask," Ethan continued, settling back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone completely in control of his domain. "You've conquered music, you've conquered hearts, you've probably conquered small nations at this point. What's left for Taylor Swift to achieve?" "World peace?" Taylor offered with a grin. "Though, honestly, I'm still working on conquering my fear of cooking. Last week I burned water. Actual water." "Impossible!" Ethan gasped in mock horror. "How does one burn water?" "Very carefully and with great determination," Taylor shot back, earning another wave of laughter. Maya watched from the wings, noting how naturally the banter flowed. Maybe her concerns had been overblown. Maybe tonight would be just another successful celebrity interview. But in the brief pause between jokes, as Ethan's smile flickered almost imperceptibly, she caught something else in his expression, a calculating look that made her stomach tighten. "You know, Taylor," Ethan said, his tone still light, but carrying the faintest edge, "I've always wondered something about stars like you. Does perfection ever get exhausting?" The question hung in the air for a beat longer than it should have. Taylor's laugh came a fraction of a second too late, and the audience seemed to sense the shift. Their laughter more uncertain now, scattered rather than unified. "Perfection?" Taylor tilted her head, her smile still in place but tighter around the edges. "Ethan, you clearly haven't seen me try to parallel park." "Oh, come on." Ethan pressed, leaning forward in his chair like a predator catching a scent. "I mean the whole Taylor Swift experience. The flawless albums, the strategic friendships, the perfectly timed public appearances. Do you ever just mess up? Like, genuinely mess up without a PR team to spin it?" The studio fell quieter. DJ Lee's fingers hesitated over his keyboard, the usual musical punctuation absent. In the wings, Maya felt her pulse quicken as she watched Taylor's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "I mess up all the time," Taylor replied, her voice still controlled but carrying a new defensive edge. "I'm human, Ethan. I stub my toe, I say the wrong thing, But do you, though?" Ethan interrupted, his smile never wavering even as his words grew sharper. "I mean, when was the last time you did something genuinely spontaneous? Something that wasn't focus-grouped and market-tested and approved by a committee?" A few audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Someone coughed. The energy in the room had shifted from warm anticipation to something more volatile. "I write songs about my actual life," Taylor said, her composure beginning to crack. "My actual feelings. That's pretty spontaneous." "Is it?" Ethan's eyebrows raised in mock curiosity. "Or is vulnerability just another brand strategy? I mean, you've turned heartbreak into a billion-dollar empire. That takes planning, doesn't it?" Maya grabbed her headset, her finger hovering over the button that would signal the stage manager. This was going too far, too fast. But before she could intervene, she noticed the live tweet feeds on her monitor. Engagement was spiking. The hashtag then VS Taylor was already trending. Back on stage, Taylor's smile had become a grimace. "You know what, Ethan? Some of us don't need to tear other people down to feel relevant." The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. Ethan's eyes lit up like he'd just struck gold. "Oh, now we're getting somewhere," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the studio. "Let's talk about authenticity for a minute," Ethan continued, settling back in his chair like he was getting comfortable for a long conversation. "Because I think our audience would love to know how much of Taylor Swift is real Taylor, and how much is, let's call it strategic Taylor." The question landed like a slap. Taylor's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair, her knuckles going white. The studio audience had gone completely silent now, the kind of silence that felt dangerous. Everything I do comes from a real place, Taylor said, her voice steady but strained. My music, my performances, my... Really? Ethan interrupted, his tone dripping with skepticism. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've got the whole thing down to a science. Album release, strategic dating rumors, carefully curated feuds, redemption arc, rinse and repeat. He gestured broadly, playing to the cameras. I mean, compare that to artists like, I don't know, Fiona Apple or Sinead O'Connor. Women who actually said what they meant, consequences be damned. A few audience members made uncomfortable noises, soft oohs, and sharp intakes of breath. Taylor's face flushed red, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the color rising in her cheeks. Those are incredible artists, Taylor said, her voice tighter now. But just because I've learned how to navigate this industry doesn't make my art less genuine. Navigate? Ethan pounced on the word like a cat with a mouse. Is that what we're calling calculated image management now? Because, let's be honest, you've turned relatability into a brand. Girl next door millionaire. It's genius, really. But is it art? DJ Lee, sensing the room's discomfort, hit a sarcastic rimshot on his drums. Badum TSS. A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience, but they felt forced, hollow. You know what? Taylor's voice had risen slightly, her media training finally beginning to crack. Some of us actually care about connecting with people, instead of just getting cheap laughs by tearing them down. In the control room, Maya's hand hovered over the emergency commercial break button. The live social media feeds were exploding. Hashtag Team Taylor and hashtag Team Ethan were both trending now, along with increasingly hostile commentary from viewers. Ethan's smile grew wider, predatory. Connecting with people? Or connecting with their wallets? Because last I checked, your last tour made about as much as the GDP of a small country. The audience was no longer just uncomfortable. They were divided, some applauding Ethan's boldness while others began to boo softly. Taylor sat back in her chair, something shifting in her posture. The defensive hunch of her shoulders relaxed, replaced by the straight-backed confidence that had carried her through congressional hearings and courtroom battles. When she spoke again, her voice carried a new steel. You know, Ethan, for someone who makes a living off other people's talent, you seem awfully concerned about what's authentic. She paused, letting the words sink in. Tell me, when was the last time you created something that wasn't just reacting to what someone else built? The audience erupted. A wave of applause and cheers swept through the studio, punctuated by whistles and shouts of approval. Even some crew members could be seen nodding appreciatively in the wings. Ethan's smile faltered for the first time all evening. His fingers drummed against his desk, a nervous tell Maya had noticed during his worst interviews. The confident predator suddenly looked more like cornered prey. Oh, that's rich, coming from someone who writes the same breakup song 40 different ways. He shot back, his voice sharper now, the practiced charm replaced by genuine irritation. At least I don't pretend my therapy sessions are profound art. The boos came immediately, louder this time, more unified. Someone in the audience shouted, "That's enough," and others murmured their agreement. The energy in the room had completely flipped. What had started as Ethan's ambush was becoming Taylor's rally. DJ Lee looked between them nervously, his hands frozen over his keyboard. This wasn't playful anymore. This was blood sport. Maya pressed her finger to her earpiece, listening to the frantic chatter from the control room. The tweets were pouring in faster than the monitors could display them, most of them defending Taylor and criticizing Ethan's approach. Taylor leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Ethan's face. You know what the difference is between us? When I'm vulnerable, it actually means something. Quote. The studio held its breath, waiting for Ethan's response. His jaw clenched, and Maya could see the exact moment he decided to abandon any pretense of professional courtesy. Vulnerable? Ethan's laugh was harsh, cutting through the tension like a blade. Let's talk about vulnerable, Taylor. Let's talk about how you wrote an entire album about a 3-month relationship with a teenager when you were 21. Or how about the way you turned your friendship with Don't? Taylor's voice cracked like a whip, all pretense of media-trained politeness gone. Don't you dare. Or what? Ethan leaned forward, his eyes glittering with malicious excitement. You'll write a song about me? Add me to the long list of people who've apparently wronged the innocent Taylor Swift. I mean, at what point do we acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, you're the common denominator in all this drama? The audience was in chaos now. Some still booing Ethan, while others seemed transfixed by the train wreck unfolding before them. DJ Lee, sensing the moment, hit a dramatic drum roll that somehow made everything feel both more theatrical and more real. You want to know what's authentic? Taylor stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. This, right here. You sitting there, desperate for relevance, trying to build your career on tearing down mine because you know you'll never create anything half as meaningful as what you're mocking. Meaningful? Ethan shot to his feet as well, the pretense of a casual interview completely shattered. You want to talk about meaningful? You've made a fortune selling teenage feelings to middle-aged women who should know better. Maya's hand slammed down on the emergency commercial button, but Jonah's voice crackled through her earpiece. Don't you dare cut this! This is television gold. The two stars faced each other across the desk like gladiators in an arena, years of industry frustration and personal grievances spilling out in real time. At least I'm not a failed comedian hiding behind a desk. Taylor shot back, her voice rising. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. His face went red, then white, his carefully constructed persona crumbling in real time. Failed comedian? Failed? He stepped around the desk, closing the distance between them. I built this show from nothing while you were being handed Grammy nominations for whining about your ex-boyfriends. Handed? Taylor's voice cracked with fury. I wrote every word. I fought for every... Oh, spare me! Ethan cut her off, his voice booming across the studio. You want to talk about fighting? Try bombing at the Comedy Cellar for 5 years while your trust fund friends get Netflix specials. Try having actual critics instead of teenage girls who think your diary entries are poetry. The audience was on its feet now, some screaming support for Taylor, others cheering Ethan's brutal honesty, most just staring in shock at the complete meltdown happening before their eyes. Security guards had positioned themselves near the stage, unsure whether this was performance or genuine crisis. At least I don't punch down for applause. Taylor shouted over the noise. At least I don't need to humiliate my guests to feel important. What kind of person invites someone on their show just to destroy them? The kind who's tired of pretending that manufactured pop stars are artists. Ethan fired back. The kind who remembers when musicians had something to say beyond, I'm sad, buy my album. DJ Lee had stopped playing entirely, his mouth hanging open as he watched his boss and the world's biggest pop star tear each other apart. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every sneer, every gesture, every moment of raw hatred. You know what your problem is, Ethan? Taylor's voice dropped to a venomous whisper that somehow carried throughout the studio. You're so bitter about your own mediocrity that you can't stand being in the same room as actual success. This pathetic little tantrum, this is why you'll never be more than a footnote. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stared at her, his chest heaving, his face a mask of pure rage. The audience held its collective breath, waiting for his response. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. Get out of my studio. Gladly, Taylor snarled, already turning toward the exit. Enjoy explaining this to your advertisers. The studio erupted into chaos as she stormed off stage, leaving Ethan standing alone under the harsh lights, his career potentially in ruins. While the battlefield erupted on stage, the real war was being fought in the control room. Maya Rodriguez stood frozen at her console, watching the monitors in horror as her childhood idol and her boss destroyed each other in real time. Cut to commercial! Now! She shouted into her headset, her finger hovering over the emergency brake button. Don't you dare touch that button! Jonah Fields commanded from behind her, his voice cutting through the chaos of technicians scrambling to adjust camera angles and audio levels. This is the best television we've produced in 5 years. They're tearing each other apart. Maya spun around to face him, her eyes blazing. This isn't entertainment. It's a public execution. It's exactly what entertainment should be, Jonah replied coldly, his eyes fixed on the social media feeds exploding across his tablet. Raw, unfiltered, real. Do you see these numbers? We've got 3 million concurrent viewers and climbing. Hashtag Taylor vs. Ethan is #1 worldwide. On the monitors, they watched Taylor storm off stage while Ethan stood shell-shocked, the audience in complete pandemonium. Several people were filming with their phones, adding to the viral potential. "She trusted us," Maya said, her voice breaking slightly. "Taylor trusted us to treat her fairly and we gave her a platform," Jonah interrupted. "What she did with it is her choice. Besides, this could be the best thing that ever happened to her career. Controversy sells albums, Maya. You know that." Around them, the control room staff worked frantically. Camera operators were getting conflicting instructions through their headsets, sound technicians were trying to filter out the audience noise, and the director was having a nervous breakdown over whether to follow Taylor backstage or stay with Ethan's meltdown. "Sir?" A young production assistant called out nervously, "We're getting calls from the network. They want to know if we should cut the feed." "Tell them we're experiencing technical difficulties," Jonah said, without missing a beat. "We'll resolve them in exactly." He checked his watch. 8 minutes and 30 seconds. "When the show officially ends." Maya stared at him in disbelief. "You're going to let this air? All of it?" "Every glorious second," Jonah confirmed. "In 10 years, people won't remember what songs Taylor Swift released in 2025, but they'll remember this night forever." In the hallway, they could hear shouting. Taylor's security team arguing with studio security, her publicist on the phone, probably already crafting damage control statements. "This is going to destroy lives," Maya whispered. "This is going to make careers," Jonah replied, turning back to his screens where the numbers kept climbing. Taylor had almost reached the stage exit when Ethan's voice stopped her cold. "You know what's really pathetic?" he called after her, his voice carrying across the stunned studio. "All those songs about being misunderstood, about being the victim, when the truth is, you've never had a real problem in your life that money couldn't solve." She froze, her hand on the curtain. For a moment, the only sound was the murmur of the confused audience and the click of phone cameras. Then, slowly, she turned back to face him. "You want to know about real problems, Ethan?" Her voice was different now, smaller, but somehow more devastating. "You want to know what it's like to have every relationship dissected by strangers? To have your eating disorder speculation become dinner table conversation? To watch your mother fight cancer while people make jokes about your publicity stunts?" The studio went dead silent. Even the crew members stopped moving, frozen by the raw pain in her voice. "You think I write about heartbreak for fun?" Taylor continued, tears streaming down her face, her makeup running in dark streaks. "You think I enjoyed having my private phone calls leaked? Having my trauma turned into memes? Having people like you decide that my pain isn't real because I'm successful?" Ethan's face had gone completely white. The predatory gleam in his eyes was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like horror as he realized what he'd unleashed. "Taylor, he started, but she wasn't finished. "I was 19 when grown men started calling me a slut on national television. 19. And I smiled through it, because that's what good girls do. I've been performing strength for so long that I forgot what it felt like to actually be weak." Her voice cracked completely. "So congratulations, Ethan. You got your authentic moment. You got to see Taylor Swift completely broken down. I hope it was worth it." The silence that followed was absolute. Not a cough, not a whisper, not even the sound of breathing. The audience sat transfixed, caught between sympathy and shame at witnessing something so private made public. DJ Lee's hands had fallen completely away from his keyboard. Security guards looked at each other uncertainly, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Ethan stood behind his desk like a man watching a building collapse, finally understanding that he'd torn down something he could never rebuild. He whispered, but Taylor was already walking away, her shoulders shaking, leaving behind only the echo of her words and a studio full of people who suddenly felt very small. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every step of her retreat into the darkness beyond the stage lights. The backstage hallway erupted into chaos as Taylor disappeared through the exit doors. her security team forming a protective wall behind her. Maya arrived breathless, pushing past confused production assistants and frantic publicists. "Taylor, wait!" Maya called out, but Taylor's head of security held up a firm hand. "She's done," he said quietly. "Get us out of here. Now." Through the loading dock doors, Maya could see the black SUV idling, its engine running like a getaway car. Taylor climbed in without looking back, and within seconds, the vehicle disappeared into the New York night, carrying away the wreckage of what should have been a routine publicity appearance. Back in the studio, Ethan stood motionless behind his desk as the audience slowly filed out in stunned silence. Some looked at him with disgust, others with pity. Most just looked confused, as if they'd witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. DJ Lee quietly packed up his equipment, avoiding eye contact with his boss. "I'm going home," he muttered. Maya found herself back in the control room staring at the monitors showing an empty stage. Jonah was hunched over his phone, already fielding calls from network executives, his earlier excitement replaced by damage control urgency. "We need to talk about editing," he said without looking up. "Legal wants to review everything before." "No," Maya said quietly. "What?" "I said no." She turned to face him, her voice steady but her hands shaking. "I won't be part of this anymore." She grabbed her purse and walked toward the door, pausing only to look back at the monitors one last time. On screen, a janitor was quietly sweeping up the debris from the audience. Discarded tissues, dropped phones, the detritus of a night that had gone terribly wrong. Outside, the world was already dissecting what they'd witnessed. Hashtag Taylor vs. Ethan had exploded across every platform, but for the first time in her career, Maya didn't care about the numbers. Some spectacles, she realized, came at too high a price. In his empty studio, Ethan finally sat down, alone with the silence and the growing realization that he might have just destroyed everything he'd spent years building, including himself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Quote,